Picture this. It's 2006. You've done everything right, saved for decades. You've got $1 million sitting in bonds and CDs, generating somewhere around $55,000 to $60,000 a year in interest. Life is good. Retirement is comfortable. Then 2008 hits. Then the Fed's response to 2008. And over the years that follow, as CDs mature and bonds renew at new rates, that same $1 million, same account, same discipline, same person could eventually find itself generating closer to $20,000 a year. Not because you failed, not because you made a bad decision, because you were renting your income and the landlord changed the terms. That's what this video is about. And if your retirement income is sitting in bonds, CDs, dividend stock, or anything else that renews on someone else's schedule, stay with me. If you want to see how this applies to your specific situation, I'll drop a link at the end to book a free call. It's a clarity conversation, not a sales call. More on that at the end, but here's the question nobody in the retirement industry thinks to ask. Are you renting your retirement income, or do you own it? When you rent a home, you have a place to live, right? It works until the landlord raises the rent, decides not to renew, or sells the building. You're always one decision away from having your situation changed by someone else. When you own, the bank can't raise your mortgage, they can't evict you, the payment is yours, it doesn't move. Most people are renting their retirement income and mistaking it for ownership. Bonds, CDs, dividend stocks, even fixed instruments like MYGAs, they may lock in a rate for a period, but eventually they mature and face renewal risk. All of them are subject to terms that someone else controls. They look stable until they aren't. And in retirement, when they aren't, you don't have a paycheck to fall back on. Now, that's the setup. Now, let me show you what it looks like when the landlord actually changes the terms. So in 2006, retirees locked into bonds and CDs and were capturing yields of 5.5% to 6%. So $1 million portfolio was generating somewhere between $55,000 to $65,000 a year. Comfortable, predictable, it felt safe. Then came 2008. Then the Fed's sustained response to 2008. And over the years that followed, as instruments matured and renewed at the new prevailing rates, 2%, sometimes less. That income didn't collapse overnight. It eroded, renewal by renewal, CD by CD. Now that $1 million portfolio that had been generating $55,000 a year, for a conservative retiree relying on rolling short-term instruments, income could eventually compress towards $20,000 a year, or even less, and it stayed there for nearly a decade. Now, the people who got hit hardest weren't reckless. They were conservative retirees who thought they were doing the right thing. Bonds, CDs, safe stuff, right? The problem wasn't the decision. The problem was the structure. They built an income plan on something they didn't own. And when renewal rates collapsed, the plan had to be rebuilt, often in their 70s, with fewer options and a shrinking window. Now, here's what makes this more than just a history lesson. That decade of near zero rates ended less than 5 years ago. It's not ancient history, and the income plans most people are building right now are structured the same way. Right now, interest rates are meaningfully higher than they were during that entire near zero period from roughly 2011 through early 2022. Now, that matters because annuity payout rates, which move with interest rates, are significantly more favorable today than they were for most of the last 15 years, which means the cost of owning your income is lower relative to the income it produces. Nobody knows exactly where rates go from here, and that's precisely the point. Because here's what we do know. The near zero decade happened once. It lasted 10 years. The retiree who were renting their income during that period didn't get a warning. Their CD matured and they went to renew, and rates had collapsed. Now, the question isn't whether that can happen again. The question is whether you want to be exposed to it if it does. Think about someone who locked in a 30-year fixed mortgage before rates shifted. They didn't need to predict the future. They just needed to own the payment. Whatever happened to the rates after that didn't change their number. That's what owning your retirement income does. You lock in a payment. What happens to rates after that is somebody else's problem. Now let me show you what this actually looks like with real numbers. So say you need $45,000 a year in retirement on top of Social Security. If you build that income through bonds or CDs alone, at today's rates, you need to tie up roughly $1 million in capital to generate $45,000 a year. And that assumes rates cooperate at renewal, which, as we just covered, is not guaranteed. Now, here's where it gets interesting. In many cases, retirees today may be able to create that same baseline income with substantially less capital by structuring through a properly designed lifetime income annuity rather than relying entirely on interest-bearing assets. Now, the exact amount depends on age, the specific product, and how the plan is built. But for illustrative purposes, that same $45,000 a year of guaranteed lifetime income might require somewhere in the range of $600,000 rather than $1 million. Same income, but roughly $400,000 of less capital tied up to produce it. Now, here's the part that changes everything. That $400,000 doesn't disappear. It's still yours. It's not locked away. It's not gone. It goes into a growth bucket, invested for the long term, not harvested every month to cover living expenses. And here's why that matters so much. Growth assets only do their job when they're left alone, when they're not being liquidated month after month to pay for groceries and utility and travel. When the market drops 20%, the person who doesn't need to sell anything is in a completely different position than the person who does. That $400,000 growing without that pressure for 10 to 15 years has a real shot at becoming something significantly larger. And the whole time it's growing, the income is already taken care of. So what does the full picture actually look like? $45,000 a year in income you own, contractually guaranteed, showing up regardless of what the markets do, regardless of what the Fed does, regardless of what your CD would have renewed at, plus a growth bucket that's actually been allowed to grow because it's not doing double duty as an income source. That's not a trade-off. That's what it looks like when every dollar has a job. Everything I just walked through, the rent versus own framework, the capital comparison, the growth bucket unlock, that's exactly what we map out in the free clarity call. 30 minutes, no obligation. You leave knowing exactly where your current income plan sits on the rent versus own spectrum and what it would take to move it. Now, I want to end on something that doesn't show up in a spreadsheet. When the income is owned, when it's contractually guaranteed to show up no matter what, something changes in how retirement actually feels. The Monday morning portfolio check stops being a stomach drop and starts being background noise. The question of whether to take the trip, whether to spend the money, stops being a debate because the income isn't going anywhere. That's not a soft benefit. That's the actual experience of retirement changing. Now, most retirees carry low-grade financial anxiety through what should be the best years of their lives. Not because they don't have enough money, because they don't have a system. Every month is a series of decisions. Every market dip is a question mark. Every withdrawal is a small debate. That's what renting feels like, always wondering what the landlord is going to do next. Owners don't live that way. That's what structure actually feels like. Not a number on a statement, a retirement that feels like life instead of ongoing financial triage. If you've been watching this and thinking, this makes sense, but I honestly don't know if I'm renting or owning right now, that's exactly who this clarity call is built for. You don't need to know what an annuity is. You don't need to have a number in mind. You just need to want to see clearly where your income plan actually stands. Here's what this session is and what it isn't. Again, it's a 30-minute clarity conversation. We map out the annuities and retirement framework to your numbers. You leave knowing whether you have an income gap, what your current income sources are actually doing, and whether owning your income is something that belongs in your plan. It's not a sales call. It's not a pitch. There's no commitment required of any kind. A lot of people who book didn't because they felt like they needed to know more first. Now, that's backwards. This isn't where people go to decide. It's where people go to figure it out. The link is in the description. It's free, it's 30 minutes, and at a minimum, you'll leave knowing whether you're renting your retirement or whether you own it. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one.